Looped slideshow. On backgrounds of warm yellow, vivid sky blue and soft red, details of the keynote session are shared. Each new slide features a large white text box with black text and a bold black outline of a geometric shape, circles, triangles or parallelograms. First slide on yellow, text reads, "From Access to Inclusion, an Arts and Culture Summit." Next slide. Text reads, "Welcome to the Policy Implementation Keynote. Find out more by visiting adiarts.ie/summit and kennedy-center.org, with centre spelt CENTER. Next slide. Text reads, "Meet our chair, Pádraig Naughton, Executive Director, Arts and Disability Ireland." There is a photograph of Pádraig on the right, a man with fair complexion and dark hair, greying throughout. His hair is cut neatly at the sides and parted with a slight fringe crossing his forehead. He wears a white shirt and pink tie. Pádraig sits on a dark couch with pale throw cushions. He is soft-spoken, with an Irish accent. Next slide. Text reads, "Meet our presenters. Cymie Yeung, Manager of the Accessibility Office, West Kowloon Cultural District Authority." There is a photo of Cymie, a young woman with long dark brown hair, a dewy olive complexion and dark brown eyes. In this image, Cymie wears a dark check shirt, tilts her head slightly and sports a half smile, looking straight to camera. She sits in a workspace with bookshelves behind her. Next slide. Text reads, "Access services available today. Irish Sign Language interpretation, British Sign Language interpretation, American Sign Language interpretation," with the associated logo for sign language, 2 hands, both forming a circle by pressing thumb and forefinger together. Also, speech to text, brackets CART, with the associated logo, a rectangular speech bubble with 3 horizontal lines in it. Next slide. Text reads, "Screen layout." This slide displays the layout of the event. A large frame is in the centre, where the main speaker will be live streamed during the keynote. In this slide, Pádraig Naughton's image is here. There are 4 more images in each corner of the slide. In the top left-hand corner is the logo "From Access to Inclusion." In the top right-hand corner is a still image of Lisa Harvey, the ISL interpreter. Lisa stands before a blue background, wearing a black top, her forearms bare. In the bottom right-hand corner is Sally Gillespie, the BSL interpreter. She too stands before a blue screen and wears a black top, with her forearms bare. The last image in the bottom left-hand corner is of Sharon Ploger, the ASL interpreter. Sharon sits before a black screen, wearing a grey long-sleeve top. At the bottom of the slide is a line of text which reads, "Speech to text, CART, will be visible here." Next slide. Text reads, "For tech support, use the chat feature at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, or please email sile@adiarts.ie or support@eventcube.io. Next slide. Text reads, "Audience Q&A. We want to hear from you. Please submit your questions throughout this session in the Q&A box underneath this video. The Submit Your Question field has been clearly labelled for screen readers. This question field is located beneath this video." Next slide. The From Access to Inclusion logo on our left. On our right, the text "Starting Soon," with a reminder of the social media details, each typed as one word. Facebook account, Arts and Disability Ireland. Twitter account, ADI Arts. And Instagram account, Arts and Disability Ireland. Hashtag Access Summit.
Hello, my name is Pádraig Naughton, Executive Director of Arts and Disability Ireland, the National Development and Resource Organisation for Arts and Disability in Ireland, and today I'm coming to you from Dublin. You are very welcome to the first keynote presentation of From Access to Inclusion, an Arts and Culture Summit, hosted by Arts and Disability Ireland and the VSA and Accessibility Office at the John F. Kennedy Centre for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. I'm delighted to introduce Cymie Yeung, Manager with the Accessibility Office at the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority in Hong Kong. Cymie joined the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority in 2016 to develop and implement a comprehensive policy on universal accessibility, stretching across 40 hectares of reclaimed land. The Cultural District is one of the largest cultural projects in the world, blending art, education and open space. In her role as manager of the Accessibility Office, Cymie works closely with different departments across the district and the disability community to ensure access and inclusion remain at the core of the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority's vision to build a vibrant cultural quarter for Hong Kong, dedicated to bringing local and international artists together with audiences to be inspired by and to celebrate the arts. Cymie has also completed a Master's of Laws in Human Rights at the Faculty of Law at the University of Hong Kong in 2019, focusing her research on the equality and cultural rights of persons with disabilities. In the same year, she became the first international recipient of the Leadership Exchange in Arts and Disability LEAD Award for Emerging Leaders from the John F. Kennedy Centre for the Performing Arts. From Access to Inclusion is made possible with the support of the John F. Kennedy Centre for the Performing Arts, the Arts Council, the British Council, Ireland Office, and the Creative Europe Desk. So just a reminder before passing over to Cymie that you are welcome to submit questions, as her presentation will be followed by a Q&A session which I'll be chairing with Cymie immediately afterwards. So with that, Cymie, over to you.
Hi, Proj, and everyone joining us online. Thank you very much for the introductions and having me here today. It's my honor to speak at this summit to share our works in Hong Kong. I'll start with this picture of a corner of the waterfront promenade facing the Victoria Harbour and the skyline of Hong Kong Island on a sunny day. In the middle of the picture is a young boy riding a scooter towards the right, slightly ahead of another boy riding a bike with a helmet. Upper part of the slide is the logo of West Kowloon and the title of my presentation today, Journey to Access and Inclusion, the case of West Kowloon Cultural District in Hong Kong. I'm going to share our journey of developing and implementing our first policy on universal accessibility. Before going into details, let me tell you some backgrounds of our district. Here you see an aerial view showing the west end of the cultural district sitting beside the Victoria Harbour in the heart of Hong Kong, with some greenery spaces and construction sites and buildings that are taking shape. It is a center for arts and culture, education, entertainment, tourism, and public spaces all roll into one on 40 hectares of reclaimed land. Our vision is to create a vibrant cultural quarter for Hong Kong with a varied mix of arts and cultural facilities to produce and host world-class exhibitions, performances, and arts and cultural events, and to cultivate and nurture local talents in the arts. This is the master plan of our district. We have 4 venues that are in operations at the moment, and I highlighted their names in yellow on the plan. For those names highlighted in light blue, they are going to open in the near future. To make it more vivid for people with visual impairment, I usually describe the shape of this plan as a profile of the head of a horse facing to the left. Trying to imagine that you can touch it. Around the nose of the horse, we have the Hong Kong Palace Museums, which is going to open next year to showcase arts and cultural collections of the Palace Museums. Adjacent to the museums, somewhere around the mouth of the horse, we have Art Park, Free Space, and Arts Pavilions that are already opened. Adjacent to the Arts Pavilions, around the chin of the horse, we have M+ and museums focusing on 20th and 21st centuries visual culture, which is going to open this year. Next to M+, we have another performing arts venues, the Lyric Theatre Complex, mainly for dance and theatre performances. It is going to open in 2023. So these are the key facilities at the West End. We have one more venue that is already opened, the City Centres, in the east entrance of the district, somewhere around the chin of the horse, if you still remember the imaginary profile of the head of a horse that I just described. The development of the district will also include hotel, office, exhibitions and residential spaces, as well as retail, dining and entertainment facilities in phases. So now I'll play a drone footage showing our district. And on the top, you can see the city centers in front, and our first performance venues for traditional Chinese theater. And then, and now we can focus on in the middle that we can see a large building in the shape of an upside down capital letter T, which is M+ the Museums for Visual Culture. Then around the 8 o'clock directions of M+, we can see a free space with some color straps on the outside. It is the largest black box theaters in Hong Kong for contemporary performances. Its wall facing the big lawn could serve as a screen for outdoor screening. And all the areas of the greenery is our art park with cafes and restaurants for everyone to relax alongside the Victoria Harbour. And at the West End, we have the Hong Kong Palace Museums that is building in progress. And this is our district and one of the largest cultural projects at the moment, and it keeps progressing every day. Apart from building the venues and public spaces you see just now, we are also building audiences and communities, teams and talents, skills, learning and knowledge, public trust and an appetite for adventures, as well as new ways of thinking. Guiding through us are the value of the authority, including inclusion and accessibility. As we aspired to make our district a place for everyone, which is accessible, comfortable, engaging, and sociable, like what is shown on this collage, that people of different ages, including children and older adults joining gallery tours, young people riding bikes, and also groups of wheelchair users dancing in the park or socializing with friends and pets on the lawns, as we are also a pet-friendly zone in the city. In terms of accessibility, we have a statement that we are committed to making our district and the activities within it accessible to all, to ensure that everyone can take part in and enjoy the arts. We got this statement even before we have a dedicated accessibility team. So here is a timeline of our milestone on accessibility, and I'll also supplement some context of Hong Kong around the time. Our authority was established in 2008, and then from 2009 to 2011, a series of public consultations for the districts was conducted, and the needs of accessibilities were raised and emphasized throughout. Around the time, local community also has some advocacy works on the needs of changes and enhancements of accessibility in the arts in Hong Kong as a whole by inviting the overseas experts, including representatives from the Accessibility Office of the Kennedy Center and also the Smithsonian to Hong Kong to share their experience in the States with different officials and also communities members. And then at early 2013, when West Kowloon has the design drawings of the first performing arts venue, that is the Sichu Center, the authority started to collaborate with a local NGOs, us with the Disabled Association Hong Kong, to coordinate accessibility consultations with local disability community, and also invited overseas institutions to share their experiences. The picture on top is the first accessibility consultations. And different teams from performing arts and also museums also started some pilot accessible programs around 2013 and 2014, including the first accessible outdoor music festivals and also the first TED tour and audio-described Cantonese opera performance at the Bamboo Theatre. In 2016, in view of the challenges to ensure standard and consistencies across the district with facilities designed by different architects, the authority decided to set up an internal team to develop guidelines and policy. And finally, in 2018, the policy was endorsed by the board, and as a result, an accessibility office is set up to oversee and support implementations of the policies. We hope that having a formal policy can raise staff awareness, demonstrate our commitment to remove barriers and enhance accessibilities, and also to ensure certain standard, practice, and learnings across the district. Our rationale is not to impose any guidelines or limitations, but providing better support to all staff working in different areas of work within the district, as we have different teams to work on, like programs, operations, planning, and building projects, etc. To our knowledge, this is also the first comprehensive policies on accessibilities that covers all areas of work in an arts and cultural organizations like us in Hong Kong. In terms of formulating of the content and coverage, we took a lot of references from overseas institutions that have well-established guidance and policy. But we can't just copy everything because we need to consider the context of our own city and institutions. So we read through all the consultations transcripts and minutes since 2009, and then we extracted every point in relation to access and inclusion. In the end, we categorize all the points under these 10 expectations from the disability community, including accessibility on physical environment, information accessibility, the offering of accessible programs, engagement of people with disabilities in the design process, staff training on inclusion and accessibilities, equal opportunities for people with disabilities to become staff, artists, and visitors, setting up an accessibility office in the district, developing guidelines on accessibility, offering concession tickets to people with disabilities, and last but not least, developing inclusive arts and disability arts to enrich our culture. We include all these expectations in our policies directly or indirectly, and then we pass the draft to NGO partners to comment. So I always regard these policies as a product of collective efforts from all people who voiced out their needs and expectations throughout. We also intentionally featured some articles from the Conventions on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in our policy. For example, we directly incorporated Article 3, the general principles of the CRPD, into our policy text as our guidance and principles. We then include the full text of Article 9 accessibility, Article 27, work and employment, and Article 30, participations in cultural life, recreations, leisures and sports as appendix of the policies to raise awareness of our colleagues on this important convention. I highly recommend everyone who cares about inclusion and rights to read the convention, especially for us working in or interested in the field of arts and cultural accessibility, to understand and to promote Article 30, which is one of the least studied or explored articles, but it is very important and relevant to us all. To summarize the article into a brief guidance, I would say it's not just simply about culture, recreations, leisures, and sports, but deep down is about whether people are being included and empowered to participate in arts and cultural events in a meaningful manner, independently through access to venues and materials, participations in relevant activities, meaningful engagement in the process, and the opportunities to develop one's own interest and career in arts and culture. All these things are not simply about recreations or leisure, but interrelated with many other basic rights of everyone. With all these considerations, we came up with this leading paragraph. The West Kowloon Cultural District Authorities values diversities and equity and strives to demonstrate leaderships in championing accessibility by making West Kowloon Cultural District accessible to all and promoting the right to enjoy and participate in arts and culture for everyone, based on the principles of dignity, independence, inclusion, and equal opportunities. I keep emphasizing this right-based approach because this is particularly important for us in the context of Hong Kong, as the models of disabilities are seldom discussed, and the traditional views of disabilities are still quite common in the community or even within some disability community. So, in our orientations, we keep asking and reminding everyone to reflect on their own attitudes on the work of accessibility, and to emphasize that we are not adopting the traditional model, or we won't see accessibility works as something extra that we are required to do in a passive manner. Instead, we embrace the social model. So you see a green tick on the box of social model on the slide, that we keep reminding everyone that we work on accessibilities because we need to remove barriers for others, and we need to avoid reinforcing inequalities. That is our responsibility. And beyond the social model, we have two green ticks on the box of right-based model. Emphasize that we need to respect everyone as an independent person, and that we need to ensure everyone exercise rights and autonomy without barriers. To make things more concrete, we give this guidance, explaining that under this right-based model, we value participations and feedbacks from people with disabilities. We also value providing options for people to exercise their rights and autonomy, and we value dignified and equitable access for all people under the nothing about us without us spirit. The overall awareness on cultural rights and equalities is definitely one of the challenges we've been facing. Apart from that, as we work with many different expertise, the conflicting needs and priorities between different stakeholders gave us much challenges as well. We also face challenges of the events and expectations as the district grows. Sometimes, some items agreed with the community in the design process might become outdated as standards and expectations keep evolving. But we also see all challenges as opportunities, benchmark best practice, and to have more communications to get buy-in or testing of new ideas and initiatives with the community, with the nothing about us without us spirit. When we implement our policy, we identify gaps between the ideal situations, and then collaborate with teams to discuss and work on enhancements plan, and keep refining our works and strategies through continuous feedbacks and regular reviews. We also prioritize our work based on the development of the district. On the slide is a grid with details of our focus areas written on each box, including organizational buy-in and empowerment, marketing and audience development, accessible arts and cultural experiences, and best practice and technology development. A text box with the phrase engagement of people with disabilities is on top of the grid, representing that engagement of people with disabilities was across all areas. I'll demonstrate these through examples of our work. First, for organizational buy-in and empowerment, communications with disability community is always at the top of my list. On the slides, there are 3 photos. The middle one is a group photo of our chief executive officers at that time and some senior management staff meeting representatives from the government's Rehabilitation Advisory Committee for an access audit of our city center. Another 2 photos shows a wheelchair user testing out the height of a braille map and dressing room facilities at the backstage during another visit. Through these events and direct communications, everyone involved can witness and understand better the experience of people with disabilities and learn from their sharing. We also draft guidelines, educational materials, and provide technical support to our colleagues when necessary. One of the examples is our experience in promoting accessible PDFs. Accessible PDFs are not common in Hong Kong. When we first making this as a district-wide requirement, in collaborations with our web team to act as a gatekeeper, we received lots of pushbacks from other colleagues because it was very difficult to find service providers to convert our bilingual documents, so we need to work it out by ourselves. But not everyone knows how to do or willing to work. Therefore, we developed a step-by-step menu for our colleagues to follow. The picture on the left is a capture of the menu, with text boxes explaining different elements of a PDF under the accessibility view mode. We keep receiving feedbacks and refining our menus and offering small group hands-on trainings. In the end, it took almost around 2 years' time until we received fewer pushbacks. But there are also very encouraging moments, like the examples on the right, which is a capture of a seating plan under accessibility view again. On top of it is an alternative text box with descriptions of the seating plan. It was done entirely by colleagues who do not have any experience on accessible PDFs before, but followed the manual. We keep refining our menu, and gladly, now we got more interns or colleagues who are really good at fixing or converting accessible PDFs. These examples let me see the power of empowerment. It takes time sometimes and is quite challenging at the beginning, but it's totally worth it. Then, another important organizational buy-in and empowerment initiatives is, of course, staff training. Apart from designing training resources from our own perspective, we also want to ensure our colleagues can have a voice in the process. Last year, we shifted internal trainings online and collected some views and concerns from colleagues for our development of upcoming trainings and resources. This slide shows data from one of the sharings. You see a chart with 6 columns from A to F, representing different options for online training formats. This is also one of the ways to testing out our ideas, because we've been wondering what kind of learning materials can arouse our colleagues' interest, so that we can prioritize our work and utilize our resources. The highest bar is column C, representing short but multiple video clips, and then D, regular internal e-news on specific topics, and then A, presentation slides or reading materials, while B, long presentations recording got viewer support, and there are no supporter for E, do not prefer online training, or F, other suggestions. Apart from formats, we also ask colleagues to vote or suggest training topics to us. We keep everything in an anonymous manner unless they want to let me know. I think this is an important channel to create a safe space and culture for discussions on SS matters and to keep the dialogue going. For marketing and audience development, we need to ensure our information and marketing channels are accessible, including two important channels, which are our websites and mobile apps that is going to be launched later this year. On the slide, I show a screen capture of our website homepage and an illustration of a district mobile apps. It is extremely important for us for such digital platforms to include accessibility requirements at the planning stage. Otherwise, it would be very time-consuming and costly to modify the work. So, in order to ensure accessibility is not an afterthought, we provide a brief on requirements and required our teams to ensure such requirements are included in the tender. We also require the development team to collaborate with local disability groups to conduct audits and testing by people with disabilities. Sometimes meeting standard doesn't mean that it is completely user-friendly. So, the collaborations with people with disabilities in testing the digital platforms is again a very powerful way to empower and raise the awareness of everyone involved in the process. I personally also learned a lot from all the testing or report sessions. For marketing and audience development, we also reach out to the community in a proactive manner, like sending out promotions to target network directly to build up connections. And on the right is the picture of 4 people sitting around a table with a surface dot laying on the floor. This was taken recently as our museum's colleagues initiated a research on users' habits and experiences to prepare for museum's opening this year. In view of the pandemic, we actually provided a couple of options like small group meeting with social distancing measures, phone interviews, online meetings, or email communications to accommodate individuals' preference, as giving options are important principles for us. And then on the left is a capture of one of our video promotions in sign language. 1/3 of the screen is the promotional image of the event, while the remaining frame is our sign interpreter. This screen ratio is also a result of discussions with members from the deaf community to ensure that it is comfortable for watching on different devices. And now, this becomes our standard ratio for sign language promotions. And we also invite deaf interpreters to work with us for our marketing materials whenever possible. And then, accessible arts and cultural experience is another key element for our policy implementations. We encourage our colleagues to start with on-request services at our learning program first, and gradually plan on more on-demand services in different programs. One of my favorite projects is the one on the current slide. On the left is a collage of 4 pictures showing some demos of tactile materials for the tour, including seat plans of the auditorium and different sizes of acting masks of traditional Chinese theater. On the right, we have a picture of a group of people with visual impairment sitting in the auditorium. One of the ladies holding a props, which is the long beard in black around her chin, trying to imitate the adult male roles in the traditional Chinese theaters, everyone facing the lady's mouth. There was a testing tour, and for this project, we engaged 8 people who are blind or have low visions of different age and gender to join us in the design process of our SS tour. It was the first time we adopted such a participatory approach in the design of tour, and I think we had very fruitful discussions on the materials and like sizes and choice of tactile tools to be used in the tour. Again, it was a very good learning process for everyone involved. This participatory approach was initiated by our docent, who supported the SS tour because she really interested and wanted to know more about the target audience views. I think that's how we started it. And this also reminds me the importance of having good allies to work together when we implement our policies. Besides ensuring access for people with disabilities, I think accessible arts and cultural experience could benefit other people as well, which means by introducing inclusive programs and aesthetic access services like the photo on my slide, showing two performing arts interpreters collaborating to interpret a song on stage elegantly. I remember after this performance, the sign interpreter and myself stayed at the site to enjoy other programs. Suddenly, an audience approached us, told us that he was very impressed with the aesthetic of sign language. We also heard similar views and appreciations to our deaf interpreter in a recent performance at our jazz festival, which is the first time for us having a team of hearing and deaf interpreters collaborating together in a music performance. This experience reminds me of Session 2 of CRPD Article 30. That when we enable people with disabilities to have the opportunities to develop and utilize their creative, artistic, and intellectual potentials, it is not only for their own benefit, but also for the enrichment of society. For best practices and technology development, one of the examples is our work in supporting local research initiatives, as we are also exploring ways to facilitate wayfinding for people who are blind or have low visions in accessing cultural facilities in a more independent manner. On the slide is two photos of our trials of a Smart King navigation system. The photo on the left shows a user interface on a mobile app in traditional Chinese, showing different destinations of the gallery for selections. And on the right is a photo of myself accompanying a man walking along the tactile paths in a gallery with a white cane and a smartphone on his hands. The white cane has a sensor attached at the end of it, and the man is trying to tap the cane on the guided path without FID text that will send directional information to the sensor on the cane, so that user can listen to instructions or information through the smartphone. We allow the research centers to install these testing materials at our venues and conducted a series of learning and testing sessions with people who are blind or have low visions to test out the system, then giving feedbacks for the research centers to further develop and improve the technology. Our users and myself also thought that it wasn't ready to be adopted back then, but I think this is another good example of how we put nothing about us without us into practice. I got one more example of how my colleagues contribute to the access initiatives through this portable service bell. It was initiated by my colleagues responding to the concerns of some people with disabilities, since some people find it insecure to seek assistance in a dark auditorium. So my colleagues came up with this idea of a portable service bell. A device looks like a watch in a square shape and with a high contrast red button in the middle. Audience can borrow this at the information counter, and then venue staff will mark down the seat number. And once the guests press the button in the auditorium, it will not emit any sound or light, but our venue staff will be notified so they can come to check with the guests to see if any assistance is needed. This is something quite unique in our performing arts venues. We also try to provide this to people with visual impairments, booking audio description services with us, just in case they experience any issues with the audio descriptions device during the performance. We are not assuming people need help all the time, but by providing this, we also hope to offer an options for those people who want to use this service. I try to highlight some examples of our works and how we put our key principles into practice. Here are some of my reflections on our journey. For this reflection slide, I chose a picture of two young boys again. The difference from the cover slide, the two boys facing us this time, one of them riding a bike slightly ahead of another boy riding on a balance bike with his feet on the ground. I resonate this picture so much with our journey, still at a relatively early stage of just around 2.5 year history. But it's been full of challenges and of course ups and downs, and we keep trying to strike a balance to move forward all the time. But whether it's a success or a failure experience, I think it's important to acknowledge it and learn from it, because accessibility is a continuous learning journey which is never ending, and we can never reach perfection because standards will keep evolving and there are always different priorities. But it is fine as long as we have the commitment to continue working hard on it with our heart. When it comes to policy implementation, I would suggest that it is important to have both top-down and bottom-up approach. Sometimes bottom-up initiatives may be able to mobilize more changes. So getting buy-in with colleagues from all levels are of equal importance. Collaborate with your teams and collaborate with the community. For whatever we do, we need to remember people-oriented and respecting each other's, our colleagues and visitors, because after all, it is people that make places. I especially chose some pictures in this collage with people gathering at the atrium of our city center or at the lawn of our art park, taking selfies with friends, and a few more photos including children, young people, older adults with or without disabilities, joining our events with a big smiles on their faces. In our placemaking work, I treasure and love seeing all these moments, people coming together, sharing memories, making our places alive, and hopefully feeling welcome and a sense of belonging to this place in our city, Hong Kong. Last but not least, to join the multi-sign language buses, I include pictures of our sign interpreter to join me saying the final words in Hong Kong Sign Language with the captions. We look forward to seeing you. Feel free to contact me with the email on the slide, cymie.yeung@wkcda.hk, and I look forward to your questions or comments in the following Q&A time. Thank you.
Hi, Cymie. That was a wonderful presentation, so thank you so much. Just while I'm waiting for the questions to come through, and just a reminder that you can, if you haven't already submitted your questions, you can start submitting your questions now in the chat box below the screen. So, Cymie, I have just a brief question for you, which is, you mentioned the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as part of your presentation, and you mentioned Article 3, the general principles, Article 9, accessibility, Article 27, work and employment, and Article 30, cultural life. Why do you think kind of trying to incorporate something like the UNCRPD into your policy at West Kowloon is important?
I think having the right-based model of disabilities and having guidance from the UN conventions is important, because in the context of Hong Kong, we are still in a relatively medical model of mindset still within the local context or charity base when we talk about access. But at the time when I started this career, it's also the time when Hong Kong, when the CRPD took effect in Hong Kong, and so we keep using this as an advocacy tool, and we learned about it, and we took all those guidance to support our advocacy work. And it is also among the disability communities, it is also important. And so when we started think about the policy, and we want to start it from a right perspective, so we use these conventions as a guidance for us, because at the moment we think this is for us, this is one of the best guidance we have so far. So of course, there are different different ways to draft the policy, but we take this as guidance because we think that is the best available guidance at the moment when we draft our policy, and that is also in line with the wish and also expectations of the local disability community. So that's why we think we incorporated the UNCRPD, but at the same time we also incorporate some local code, but the standard of those local code are relatively not as high as the UNCRPD. So we took this UNCRPD as something that we really want to achieve. Yeah.
Okay, great. And in fact, I have a question here, and the questions that are now coming through to me is, how many are in your staff team who are involved in access?
For my team, we have a headcount of 2 to 3, but we don't want accessibility to be managed by just a dedicated team, but rather we want to mainstream importance of access to different teams. So under our policy, also require key teams and departments to have people overseeing or keep connecting with the accessibility office, so that we can communicate on accessibility matters together. And so but at the moment we also have some dedicated colleagues who are working on access programs in our performing arts divisions, and also in museums work in the learning teams, but our ideal scenario and our wish is to everyone can be able to work on access in their own areas. So we do emphasize a lot on training, and so that we can empower our colleagues to be able to work on their own areas with the mindset of accessibility in mind, and also with the right-based mindset. So we work along these areas, empowerment and empowering our colleagues. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I suppose I'm just going to try and get through as many of the questions as we can, so they're not listening to me and they're listening to you, the audience, that is. I have a question here which is asking, it's saying that engaging people with disabilities and capitalizing on their knowledge and skills through active involvement in design of programs and content has proven difficult and slow for us, often due to the low numbers and high demand on their skills. Have you any advice?
I'm not sure if I got this correctly, but for us, we started with low numbers as well, and but we rather not requiring high demand on their skills, but rather we try to listen to their real life experience and what is best for them and what is the wish. And so we try to start it from this perspective. We're not expecting that everyone is an expert or on specific items, but rather we are starting it from a customer experience perspective. That is, even though you don't have specific skills, but you can share your views and your expectations and or your life experience with us, so that we can try to think of some solutions together. And I think that's how we try to do this. Of course, there are some other people who are who have expertise on other areas of work, and we do collaborate with them as well. But for some other general audiences, we do rely a lot on these kinds of communications and also focus groups and also discussions with the disability community.
Okay, and in fact, I think this question fits with this as well, where somebody is asking, how do you suggest bringing accessibility into the mindset of an older, more established arts organisation that doesn't currently consider accessibility? Where do you start?
I think one thing that is very important is that we really need to see the values of access, that it could bring more audiences. I think that is very important because when we work in the arts and we try to share something we like to people, we also want to extend this to a wider spectrum of customers. And we do I do also experience difficulties sometimes because sometimes something that is well established and that it might be difficult to change, but I also think that try to engage with those people and connect people together with people with disabilities together. And I do think that it is very powerful when people witness the changes that us can or a certain experience that can that they can witness certain experience which is good. I think that is very important. One of the examples is like when we first started something and people colleagues may aware that when they notice that people those audience love the event and also that they are really engaging, I think this definitely changed their mindset. And another important thing is, I think one of the things that is very important is not considering accessibilities as something extra, but rather incorporating it in the work plan of everything that we do. Like you will consider lighting, you will consider safety, and you will consider all these areas of work. But accessibility is also important because when you make sure things are accessible, you can extend events to wider spectrum of audiences. I think that is something important that need to share to maybe our colleagues and also people working in the arts areas.
Great. And in fact, I have another question here, which brings us back to the CRPD, and it's how can we, as a cultural community, do more to work collaboratively across the globe to adopt Article 30 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as our guide?
Well, I think this is a very good question. Indeed, Article 30 is one of the very least discussed or explored articles among the CRPD, and even the previous special rapporteur on the cultural rights also mentioned that it is necessary perhaps to have a guidance and a reference that is dedicated to cultural rights for people with disabilities. I think it is actually a good time for us and SS practitioners like us to help promote this, and also during the process we can actually, because we have practical experience on it, so we know we know more about how to really execute on certain aspects of us. I think one of the challenges for people who didn't start on accessibilities is because they don't know how to work on it. But once perhaps we as a community, I do think services that we can take reference to, or we can build together, so that it contributes to this and to have more guidelines that can contribute to let people know how to realize and how to ensure accessibilities in the cultural field. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I'm not going to ask you any more questions about the UNCRPD, but what I will say is that actually the Centre for Policy and Law at University College Galway are going to our National University of Ireland, Galway. Their 12 summer school this year in June is going to be all about Article 30. And while the programme hasn't been announced, there might be some people like me and you talking about it. Who knows? But check out the International Disability Law Summer School, which is coming up in online with NUIG in June this year. Details are already out there on the internet, on their Facebook page, and also on the website. So I have a few more questions. Have you observed the pandemic affecting accessibility in your work in Hong Kong?
Yes, definitely. But I'm of course the venues were closed because of the pandemic, and there are also for example, like my office, we shifted all the consultations things online or in small group or through phone interviews, as I mentioned in the presentations. But apart from that, we also have some other programs that is moved online, and even after the venues are open, I think this is also there are also possibilities that events will try to implement in parallel in both online and also in physical at the venues in parallel. And for accessibility work, I do see there are lots of opportunities because of the pandemic. Like we actually, when we try to bring programs online, we can access to more people who do not have access to us before, or who do not have access to different kinds of performance before. They can try to watch those performances at home at a relatively relaxed settings, and also when I also imagined when the venues are reopened, we are also trying to explore different possibilities of having perhaps relaxed initiatives that can also make people feel more comfortable, and also because of the increasing numbers of online works. I also see that there are overall in Hong Kong, there are more programs with sign interpretations around, as people also aware of the importance of having access for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. But of course, we still think that is insufficient. But I do see that there are some positive side bringing from the pandemic.
Okay, and another question. We are coming to the end of our questions, but I think I have time for one or two more, as long as we keep it tight. What kind of training have you implemented for frontline staff when when developing new, after developing new policies? So when it comes to the implementation stage.
Well, for every staff, when we have the new employee orientations, we have we have brief introductions of all the key principles in our policy. That is include the different models of disabilities, and also why we need to and also why we emphasize on the social model and also right-based model, because we really think that is something very important, and we think people need to understand the mindsets and need to know how to bring those into practice. And then for frontline staff, we also do we also work on disability awareness and try to let like we arrange real people with disabilities to share or guide dog users to share and come with the guide dogs, and so that we can give a experience for our colleagues to have real experience and contact with people with disabilities. Sometimes people don't know, so they worried and do not know how to communicate or what is good or what is appropriate. So we try to bring in real persons with disability to share to our frontline staff. I think that is important.
Okay, great. And I suppose you had mentioned about working work and employment in terms of Article 27 UNC or OPD. And I'm curious to know, and we have had a question, do you have any staff in the cultural district who identify as being disabled?
Oh yes, we do have staff, and also of course I'm not sure if there are any person who didn't identify them. Who didn't disclose, but we do have staff with disability, and for example, like at the accessibility office, we also encourage people with disabilities to perhaps apply for our posts, and we also engage staff interpreters to work for our marketing materials. Yeah.
Okay, and we're actually almost running out of time, so I just need to thank the audience for joining us with all their great questions, and I need to find my notes as well. So to thank everyone for attending today's keynote. Thank you to Cymie. And just to remind everyone that there's now a networking rooms opening. There's a chat room and there's a video room, and they will run up until our next session at 30 minutes past the hour. That's 3:30 GMT. I'd also like to thank our sign language interpreters, as well as our captioners and EventCube and the ADI team who've been working behind the scenes as well to make everything happen. So, and then the other thing to say is that the first panel discussion at 3:30 will begin with presentations, and it's all about organizational buy-in. So I do hope you join us for it. In the meantime, go do some networking in the chat room and in the video room. And it just remains for me to say thank you, Cymie, and thank you for joining us from Hong Kong. And it's goodbye from both of us and from me from Dublin.
Looped slideshow on backgrounds of warm yellow, vivid sky blue, and soft red. Credits for this event are shared. Each new slide features a large white text box with black text and a bold black outline of a geometric shape, circles, triangles, or parallelograms. First slide on yellow. Text reads, "From Access to Inclusion, an Arts and Culture Summit." Next slide. Text reads, "Thank you. On behalf of Arts and Disability Ireland and the John F. Kennedy Centre for the Performing Arts Office of VSA and Accessibility, thank you for attending From Access to Inclusion, an Arts and Culture Summit." Next slide. Text reads, "Funders and Sponsors." The logos of 4 organisations sit below. They are the Kennedy Centre, the Arts Council An Chomhairle Ealaíon, British Council, and Creative Europe Culture. Next slide. Text reads, "Join us in our networking rooms. Meet and mingle with your peers during the break and after the final session of each day." Next slide. Text reads, "Follow us and share followed by details of hashtags and social media accounts, each typed as one word. Use hashtag #AccessSummit to feature on our lobby Twitter wall. Facebook account Arts and Disability Ireland, Twitter account ADI Arts, and Instagram account Arts and Disability Ireland.